Jinping and Tianxia. Okay. So for as long as I could remember, since I began my career as a venture capitalist 30 years ago, when I returned from America, I went to school there, came back to China. Every 10 years or so, there is some major crisis that was going to sink China. Okay, China would be in some serious trouble, and the troubles are real. Okay, I remember when I first graduated from school in America, came back, it was in the early 1990s. Those post-1989 years were difficult. Okay, everybody would say Chinese economy will buckle under the sanctions. Okay, but then we survived, powered through that one, and then there was the financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. That was bad. I don't know if you can remember. And then there was the Zhurongji reforms. Okay, the real estate bubble burst. That sounds familiar. I mean, Jingmao Tower, I don't know if you, was empty, was just built completely empty, nobody in it. Okay, and these days we have a serious problem with youth unemployment because unemployment is skyrocketing in the country. But I tell people, God, at that time during the Zhurongji reform, everybody knew someone that was unemployed. Every family of virtues felt like somebody lost their job. In Shanghai and up in Northeast, that's worse. Okay, we thought we'd never get out of that one. We powered through that one. Okay, so all the troubles are real, but the rest is history. So I look back at Xi Jinping's tenure so far. In 2012, 10 years ago, what were the serious troubles that were going to kill China, that was going to end the Chinese experiment? Okay, if you're journalists at that time, you will remember because you were probably writing about them. The three things: official corruption, economic inequality, and environmental degradation. Three major problems, major crises that were going to kill the country. Okay, that's going to end the Chinese experiment. That's going to end the Chinese project. Everybody was talking about it, if you remember. Okay, I have a PowerPoint, but it's not moving. Should I be? Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So, corruption. Okay. Hu Jintao, the General Party secretary at the time, said himself, failing to handle corruption is going to end the party and the state publicly. Okay. And the New York Times, of course, reporting on corruption every day. Okay? And they're saying that, corruption was the DNA of the party state. So they could never fix it. So it's going to sink the state. Okay? Liberal democracies are inherently so good at correcting corruption. Everybody's so clean in liberal democracies. Okay, so 10 years, I was surprised. I was shocked with the rest of people. I studied politics. I'm a student of politics. Nobody had ever seen an anti-corruption campaign like this one. Er He was a famous historian and writer in China. He wrote that this was the most intense anti-corruption movement in 2,000 years. Okay, nobody had ever seen anything like it. Okay, so the outcome, we're not there yet. There's still corruption, but everybody on the ground will tell you, much better, much better. If you look at the data, this is the Elderman trust parameter, okay? Trust in government, trust in institutions, social institutions. In the last 10 years, the US and China have diverged. The US is dropping like a rock. Okay, and we're moving up. We're not rising like a rocket, but we're moving up. Okay? Right, so corruption. So I don't broadcast this. I said Xi's report card. I saw this. I will be in trouble. Who am I to give Xi a report card? I want to delete that. Okay, so this is an interim assessment of General Secretary Xi Jinping's track record. One on corruption. Okay. Second, economic inequality. Okay. We had 20, 30 years of breakneck growth, of 10, 20 years, 30 years of market ruling everything. Okay? And the result was tremendous growth. But the byproduct was a few got really, really rich, and the rest are better off than they were before, but the gap widened tremendously. Okay? I mean, we created more billionaires than any other country in that period. Okay, think about that. We're a socialist country. Okay? And our Gini coefficient surged over 0.4. If you study politics, you know this is revolution business. Okay, 0.4, dangerous. So everybody thought this would be an intractable problem. Why is it so intractable? Because the greatest country since the birth of mankind, the United States of America, could not fix that problem. Okay, the best political system since sliced bread, liberal democracy, could not fix that problem. So of course, China's dead in the water. Couldn't fix inequality. We're going to have revolutions in our hands. Okay, so obviously we know what happened. Okay, tremendous government initiatives to fix poverty. I mean, we, in the last 10 years, during Xi's first and second term, they lifted nearly 100 million people in the last 5 years out of absolute poverty. I know the baseline is pretty low. Okay, nobody wants to be there. It's nothing. You're not sitting FCC having lunch there. Okay, but we lifted that 100 million people out of absolute poverty. It was a tremendous project. Many people died on the front line. Communist Party cadres died, gave their lives, thousands, because the conditions were treacherous in those rural areas, some of them very remote. Okay, it happened. I mean, it's never happened in Chinese history. I would put it to you. I haven't done my research, so I could be wrong, but I think China, the Chinese Communist Party, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, in the last 10 years, had lifted more people out of absolute poverty. And the hardest, bear in mind, this is the last 100 million, which is always the hardest. It's easier when you're really poor to lift the first group and second batch and third batch. This is the very last batch of people who are living in absolute poverty. They've done that for more people than any other country, currently in history of man. Okay, I venture to suggest we should research that and see if that's correct. Okay, but I think that should probably be true. Yeah. So, and the Common Prosperity Initiative, there's a paradigm shift in China's development model. We've developed fast, very successful, but we can't leave people behind. We got to close the gap. So our Gini coefficient is improving. Okay, we're not there yet. Okay, well, I always say it's a scandal. Okay, I'll say this publicly. Okay, we're the only major economy in the world, only one, that does not have an inheritance tax, that does not have a property tax, and does not have capital gain tax. Think about that. And we're a socialist country. Yeah. So there's a long way to go, but I think the report card is pretty decent for now. Third, environmental degradation. So if you go back 2012, if you're reporting about China, you're probably writing about my every day. Okay, this was going to lead to revolutions. Nobody's talking about Wumai anymore. If you go to Beijing, it's blue sky most days. Okay, one video, I remember one year, one video went viral. It could have caused major social unrests. Yeah. This is just for China. Okay, globally, I think China has been a leader in dealing with climate change. Okay, with the Paris Accord, and we have played down the principle of so-called a common but differentiated responsibility, which basically says that greenhouse gas, the effects of greenhouse gas are cumulative. So Western nations, they've accumulated so much, and now we're developing, you want us to stop. But we kind of played down that principle. We still hold to that principle, but we played down that in climate negotiations, I believe. And China, in the last 10 years, has become a global leader in green technologies. Number one. Okay. So these three major challenges, these three major crises that were going to stop China's development and its track, I believe had been not totally resolved, but achieved tremendous successes. Now, so what's going to sink us now? Okay. If I go downstairs and get the papers, New York Times, Wall Street, get all your papers down there, it's free. I come and read them all the time. Two things. I'm going to talk about one. I won't have time to talk about the other. One is the economy. Okay. The Chinese economy is slowed. And second is geopolitical conflicts. Right? So the economy, I talked about in the last chapter, that what is happening is that this has been happening for a few years now. The three major pillars, the three locomotives for China's market economy in the last 20, 30 years. Market economy, okay? Real estate, which accounts for nearly a third of our GDP. Consumer internet, you all know that, the platforms. And low-end manufacturing. Since we joined the WTO, we became the factory for the world. Okay? All three had sort of run out of steam by 2015. Okay, if you look at the data, before that, our total factor productivity has stagnated, which means that we're adding GDP, but we're not becoming more productive. Okay. It had run out of steam, especially like real estate is huge bubble, risk. Okay. Manufacturing, we've been moving up the value chain, but gradually and slowly. Okay. Quite ways to go. And then the last is infrastructure that's done by the government. So I'm talking about just market economy. Okay. Now, what needs to happen is we need to move from this old paradigm to a new paradigm, to where we can make more money out of our existing economy and develop new industries. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in the so-called middle income trap. Okay. So if you look at the two new directions, okay, one is our existing economy, our existing industrial capacity. Our industrial capacity is China's biggest asset. China's industrial capacity is about 35% of the world's. Okay, we're bigger than US, Japan, Germany put together. I used to say that. And then last month, my research assistant said that the numbers have improved actually in the last 3 months, that China's industrial capacity is now bigger than a combination of US, Japan, Germany, and India. Okay. But the value add of that industrial capacity is still relatively low. It's about 12%. It's like the gross margin of our industrial capacity, 12%. When the US, in the 1970s, when they were at the height of their industrial capacity, their gross margin was about 35-40%. Okay. And how much is that worth? Our industrial capacity is worth about 5 to 10 trillion US dollars a year. That's the denominator. To go from the numerator, go from 12% to 35-40%, think about how big the pie is. Okay. Maybe 8 to 10 points is for semiconductor. Okay. So we need to do that. Second is new industries that are driven by technology innovation, day one. Alternative energy, new materials, bioengineering, life sciences. Okay. Those China is doing great. Okay. So all of that, I believe the political leadership had concluded the market forces could not be relied upon to engineer this transition. So this had to be done through political initiatives, top down. Right? I agree to that view. I'm a venture capitalist. I knew we weren't going to those directions. We wanted to bet more on consumer internets. And a lot of my colleagues who, I'm in venture capital, I do technology, I don't do real estate, but they still want to do more real estate. Okay, so there is a gross misallocation of capital, market misallocation of capital, that's being reallocated by political initiatives, by policies. And then we'll see if the market catches up. Okay? So this is what's happening in the Chinese economy. And we're now in a difficult period. I quote the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci, who said that the old is dying, but the new is struggling to be born. And we're in the interregnum. And this is what the Chinese economy is now. And I expect that to last 2, 3, 4 years. But this is the tough period that we have to go through in order to get to the next stage. Okay. So I'll end here, and I'll take questions.
All right. Well, first of all, I just wanted to ask that the book is very new. Has anyone here actually had a chance to read the book? Okay, Kinming, only one. So our audience hasn't read the book. I know you really focused in your presentation on just the last chapter, but could you just tell us the premise of your your theory on liberalism, on your take that liberal democracy is leading civilization downwards as opposed to centralized leadership like China has?
Yeah, well, obviously, when we were graduating from universities in the 90s, okay, we all bought the story. It's like a prospectus of a bad IPO. we all bought it, that liberalism, elections, multiple parties, free press, I should be careful here at the FCC, okay? All of that stuff put together is going to take us to paradise. Okay, everybody will be, very soon, if we just did these things and copy the American Constitution line by line, in one generation, we'll all be living like Americans. Okay, I bought it. I was convinced. We were all doing it. But 30 years have passed. When we look back, opposite had happened. Those countries from Africa to Latin America to Southeast Asia who did that, who changed their political models from whatever they were, military or authoritarian, whatever they were called, to the liberal system, to the liberal regimes, none of them did very, very well. They all got stagnant. The one country that said no to it, China, succeeded. So, you have to...
But doesn't it depend on how you measure success?
If you're starving, you're not successful. You can, yeah, of course, you can say that if you're starving, if you're poor, but you can say whatever you want, you're still successful. I don't think most people will buy that. No.
I mean, some of the things that you say do not work. For example, let's talk about freedom of the press, because we are a press club after all. What is wrong with freedom of the press? Yes, I agree that there can be extremes, but generally speaking, when people have access to reliable, checkable, transparent information, they make better decisions.
I'm not sure if that's the case. Why do you say that? It's not a proven case that people... First of all, I don't think that's a proven case. Okay. Secondly, I don't think it's possible, practically. Okay. It's not a proven case. It's not like gravity, that you can prove it, that people who have reliable, checkable information, they make better decisions. I look at my kids, they don't do that, and they're grown. Okay.
Do they have access to
I look at my
information?
No, I'm in the investment business. Okay, I got highly educated people who have perfect, transparent, great information, spreadsheets up to here. They make the wrong judgments. Okay, so I just don't think it's a scientifically proven principle. You can claim it, just like you claim human rights are God-given. Okay, they're God-given. There's nothing I could say. Fine. You take that as self-evident truth, like Thomas Jefferson claimed. He didn't have to prove it because it's self-evident. God said it, right? Freedom of the press is the same thing, I think. Well, I think press plays an important role in our society. Okay? Media, journalism are important. But if not regulated and managed well, it could do a lot of harm. And could harm actual human beings, human lives. You could see everywhere in the world. Come on, look at it. Look at what's happening in the world. Okay, look at America. Look at Europe. Look at Africa. All these countries where speech is not regulated. Look at what's happening in those countries. Look at what's happening to their peoples. We don't want that.
But by the same token, in countries where speech is completely regulated,
I'm not saying
it's a black box. We don't know what's happening, and there are terrible things happening that only emerge later.
That is correct. Okay, I'm not claiming an absolute principle. I'm not claiming an abstract principle that somehow there's a particular way to regulate speech. All I'm saying is speech is a form of act. And acts are regulated because actions can harm people. We all know speech is a form of act. We know that in our heart. We know that if you grew up in an abusive family, your parents abuse you, they don't have to hit you. Okay, but that affects your life forever. You will need psychiatrists forever. Think about that. If you go to a school where teachers are abusive, he or she does not have to hit you. So words matter. Words harm. And words must be constrained and regulated in a healthy, forward-looking society. How it's done, we don't have time to discuss that, okay?
Well, in your book, you seem to believe that the Chinese Communist Party is the gatekeeper of what should be said, what should be believed, what gives them...
At the moment, like I said, I spent half a chapter on internet, okay? So all of the stuff 20 years ago, Western journalists are talking about how China was regulating the internet, it's going to kill the internet, it was kill a vibrant society, never panned out. And if you look at unfettered internet speech, social media speech, you just have to look at America. Look at what's happening there. Okay? Total polarization of society, total hostilities. There's no regard for facts, zero. Okay, talk about the abundance of information. The totally unchecked, unfettered flow of information and speech. No country does better than America. Okay? But do people make better decisions? Do they respect facts better, more? I don't think so. I don't think so. We're not going there. We keep what we've got. It's not perfect. I realize that. I live in Shanghai. I complain about it just like the next guy. Okay? Nobody doesn't complain about it.
But Eric, there are times when facts need to be out there and they are important. Like in your book, you refer twice to COVID death numbers.
Yeah.
And you sort of give an indication that the high rates of COVID deaths in Western countries are a measure of the failure of liberal democracy. But the fact is, we don't know in China how many people died. I mean, we will never know that. We will never know that because the Chinese government changed the definition of a COVID death. They didn't report people who didn't die in hospitals. And that kind of data is important for future planning of pandemics, for example. That kind of data is expected from countries who want to be partners in the world.
Let's just say, you have a point that we have incomplete information. But let's just say we do have complete information that too many people died in liberal democracies. That we do know. Too many, way too many. We don't know.
It has nothing to do with them being a liberal democracy.
Well, no, I'm not saying it has anything to do.
That just has to do with the fact that we know the numbers.
I'm not drawing a causality here. I'm just stating a fact. It's for the rest of you to decide whether politics played a role in your country's deaths. If you can go to bed and say, hey, politics has nothing to do with it, our political institutions are perfect. All these Americans died because for some other reasons, because they're stupid or whatever, then it's okay. You can believe that. Okay? You just draw your own conclusion. I'm stating a fact. I am not imposing a causal relationship on you. Okay, I'm looking at these numbers under those liberal democracies during COVID. How many people died and suffered tremendously? I'm not saying the US Constitution led to that. I'm not saying the US president led to that, who was elected in the American system. I'm not saying the Congress led to that. I'm not saying any of that. Okay, you guys decide whether politics was responsible for it.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience because I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. Just raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone. This gentleman here.
Hello, I'm To Han Chi from Singapore. Do you think that China can match Silicon Valley, since you used to be linked to Silicon Valley, in technological innovation? Because, Xi Jinping has been giving directives saying China must do this or that technology sector, but it sounds like a state-driven economy, and Chinese government has taken down to size tech entrepreneurs like Jack Ma of Alibaba. If, tech entrepreneurs like Jack Ma get taken down to size by the Chinese government, how can you have that kind of very innovative tech culture in China that produces very successful tech companies the way Silicon Valley does?
Well, let me correct two misperceptions here. Okay, one is Silicon Valley, as we all know, the U.S. Defense Department played a huge role in the beginning of Silicon Valley. Okay, from the semiconductor companies, from national, all of them were backed by the U.S. Defense Department. Okay, without the state, without the American state, there would be no Silicon Valley. Number two, well, I know Steve Jobs is great. Okay, well, Elon Musk, completely backed by the U.S. government. Its biggest customer. Come on. Okay, where would Elon Musk be without the U.S. government? So the state played a huge role. I went to Stanford, I know. Okay, I lived in Silicon Valley. I'm not saying the entrepreneurs didn't do anything. The entrepreneurs played a huge role, but the state played a big role too. Okay, let's not discount that, number one. Okay. Number two, in fact, the last 20 years, we've seen this huge big techs, Chinese big techs. We've got these big companies, like behemoths. But the level of technology innovation was actually pretty low. Most of them were business model innovations. Okay, they changed the way things are done. The QR code, okay, which is ubiquitous, right? That was invented in the 80s or 90s, long time, nothing new. They took an old technology and used it to change the way people live, which is marvelous, ingenious, but it's not technology innovation. Well, what China needs is true technology innovation. We even lag behind semiconductors, come on. So there's a long way to go. And I think that the current direction is correct, but it needs both the state and market forces. It cannot just be relied on you cannot just rely on market forces.
Questions? Yes.
I heard you talking about the ideal of a system of a political meritocracy before, but I think the last time, much of these talks were 10 years ago, so I was wondering what you think nowadays. In the West, I think many perceive the increased centralization and the reduction of checks and balances, and the party is ultimately behind the law. Where are the checks and balances there that we may not see? And do you think if there are no checks and balances, how can that be squared with a system of political meritocracy going forward?
Meritocracy and the ideas of meritocracy and check and balances are two different things. Meritocracy simply means that capable people become leaders instead of the two we're looking at in America. Okay, the 80-year-olds. Yeah. So that's a simple idea. do capable people become leaders? That's what meritocracy means. Checks and balance, that's a totally different idea. Checks and balance, I think, is what's ailing America and Europe and liberal democracies. Francis Fukuyama calls it vitocracy. Checks and balances are captured by special interests, and they capture the state. And vitocracy means that every interest group is strong enough to veto any political initiatives that are against their interests. But nobody could initiate and do something positive. And you get stuck. That's what checks and balances carried to the extreme do to your countries. We run that risk too. Our system runs that risk too. So we swing between more centralized power and more distributed power. In the history of the People's Republic, we swing between these two. But luckily, hopefully, gradually, not too drastic, like we had disasters like Cultural Revolution, but we survived that. So now we're in a period where I personally think stronger leadership is called for to engineer the economic transition, because there are a lot of vested in real estate. How do you burst the real estate problem? We've known the problem for many, many years, but there are too many special interests. Corruption. Too many checks and balances lead to more corruption, potentially, because nobody could, right? So we need stronger leadership to correct the three major problems that we talked about. And as you know, we face tremendous geopolitical risks. So all of these things call for stronger leadership, I believe. That's my personal view. Some people don't agree with me. There could be a time, circumstances change, that we need more distributed power. That's possible too, but it's not now.
Over here.
Can you comment on the current big news on TikTok from the point of view of pros and cons? Because you were mentioning that a platform like TikTok can have news of all sorts and nobody checked the truth. Regulating TikTok, would that help? What's the pros and cons in regulating TikTok or banning it altogether in the US?
I don't know. If you have children like I do, you want to ban TikTok. Okay, but that's a separate matter. Right now, TikTok's trouble is essentially driven by geopolitical tensions. Right? There are people in the United States who think a Chinese-owned company to have such influence, big. It's actually interesting. It's actually a phenomenon that if you really think more information the better, and people are smart enough to figure out what's fake and what's, just put them all out there, then TikTok shouldn't be a threat in America. But sizable sections of American society, vast majority of the House of Representatives, think that it is. So I think it's America's decision to make. But the Chinese government have a say in it, I think. I read in the papers, I didn't follow the case, but.
So is Facebook. A lot of things in the Facebook.
Yeah, but they think a foreign company poses greater threat, right? Well, that's what Donald Trump says. He says, don't ban TikTok because Facebook is worse. Well, think about that. God, it's not a glorious case for freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is in trouble in America. It's in deep trouble because it's causing so much harm in their societies. So much.
A question over here.
Hi, two questions, if I may. First, industrial policy. How can you ensure that it's successful? Argentina, Latin America, they tried import substitution. Japan had the METI ministry in the 90s, and I don't know. So, question number one: how do you ensure that industrial policy it becomes successful. Second question, in Karl Popper's conception of politics, the main criterion is that if a strong government turns bad, you can recall it. How would you say this could happen in today's China?
In America, like I said, government turns bad, you recall it, the next one's just as bad or worse, and keeps going like this. There's no end to it. It's called elect and regret. And it's a continuous cycle of elect and regret. The numbers show that for decades. I mean, every time after an election, people regretted what they elected. That's not a good case. Okay. All right, back to industrial policy. My answer is you cannot guarantee it will be successful. Just like when you make a venture capital investment, you cannot guarantee it's going to make money. You know, you just have to be smart about it. You have to have capable people at the helm, number one. Number two, you cannot just do it with the state. You have to combine it with market forces. So you have to do both. You can't go back to Soviet Union, to a centrally planned economy. That doesn't work. So you have to do, but you cannot do go-go neoliberal market economy. We all know that doesn't work. Yeah, so you have to combine it. And I think, the industrial policy, you got to give it time. 15 years ago, everybody was saying China's industrial policy on solar was a huge failure. I lived through it. Thank God, I didn't make investments in those industries. I made one that was successful, but in wind power, okay? But all these companies failed because access, capacity. So when you pursue industrial policy, it's inevitable you waste a lot of capital because you make mistakes. But look at it now. And China's solar industry is the most successful in the world. But it's taken 10, 15 years. And a lot of self-correction, you know.
Yes, question over here.
Thank you. First of all, I respect your bravery in coming into the FCC, where opinions might be extremely different. But on the other, as a psychologist, I'm just wondering, with all the changes that are going on in China, for example, all these people who invested in mortgages with Evergrande and all that, and these huge amount of young people who are unemployed, now their mental health must be of concern to the government. And what are they doing about it? Did you have any idea? I mean,
No.
Especially economic-wise, it must have a big impact.
I have not studied it, and I think that's a valid point. We're going through a challenging period for our economy, and although I wouldn't say it's as challenging as what America went through in 2008, that was massive, much, much worse than what we're going through now. But I think your points are really valid. Especially with young people, they were coming out with full of hope, and now the economy is slowing. They feel they don't have as many opportunities. So all of that, I think the government, the society as a whole, have a lot of work to do. It's unfortunate when your society and economy are going through tremendous changes. These collateral damage happens. I was talking to some university students in Hong Kong the other day. I drew an imperfect comparison between China and America. In China today, we're becoming bigger, becoming the largest economy in the world, but just becoming the largest economy in the world was very similar to around the same time last century when America, between World War I and World War II, was quietly becoming the largest economy in the world. And you will know between the two Roosevelts what America went through. Great Depression. It lasted 10, 15 years. Means people starved to death, piled up corpses on the street. You don't have to read, just search for photographs of the Great Depression. and what American society, American people went through to claim the American century was tremendously difficult, huge suffering. So you're right, we need to be mindful of these difficulties that are, and to be caring about human beings, especially young people.
Just following up on that, Eric, the other problem that China faces is, of course, the aging population.
Yes.
So in combination with incredibly high youth unemployment, which we don't know what it is anymore because the government stopped releasing numbers, the whole lying flat and being full-time sons and daughters phenomenon where young people just say, forget it, I'm not even going to apply for a job, I'm just going to stay home and cook for my grandparents, plus the aging population. That's a very visible time bomb.
These are huge challenges that we have to tackle. And we have to make sure the economic transition succeeds. I mean, if we stayed on the old course, I think the time bomb was much bigger. I wish we had gone on this change sooner, but we are doing it. I wish we had dealt with the real estate problems sooner, but we are doing it. And the demographics, that's...
What can China do about the demographics? I mean, China created the demographics. There's always consequences when you meddle with fertility.
Well, the demographic challenges are not unique to China.
No, they're not, but China
Japan
has
didn't
them.
meddle, and its population declining faster than us. Our population was growing out of hand. If we didn't meddle at that time, we'd have the opposite problem. Okay, maybe we didn't quite get it exactly right, but if we didn't meddle at that time, we'd be in probably bigger trouble now. There's no way we could have implemented these market reforms and these. Can you imagine if we were, having 10 children per family after which people were doing?
Yeah, people would be starving. But the thing is, now that those measures are gone, people don't want to have families. The birth rate in China is
that's correct.
Is not replacement
that's a
rate.
major problem, and it's a common problem faced by so many countries. And I think the root causes are much deeper than we think. The root causes are cultural, economic, many things. So it's a worthy of studying.
Some more questions here?
Hi, Dr. Lee. My name is Neville. I work in the public sector consulting field. So my question to you is, in the next decade or two, what do you think of the role of China in the making of the Asian century? Or are we seeing a shifting away from Asian century to more Indo-Pacific century? So what's your take on that? Thank you.
Well, I don't know if we're going to have an Asian century or Indo-Pacific century. I think the primary contradiction in our world today in the next 10, 20 years is that there are people and countries who want to maintain a unipolar world, and there are peoples and countries who want to nourish and grow a multipolar world. Okay, that's the primary contradiction. And the unipolar world is a world that's essentially post-Cold War, in that short period after Cold War, and maybe 5-10 years ago, I don't know when. Historians will have a better say on that. It lasted maybe a generation. Okay, that basically the U.S. is the hegemonic dominant power, unquestioned. Their economic system, their military, their ideology can be imposed on any other country who disagree with them, violently if necessary. Okay, that's the unipolar world, which we know, we live through it. Okay, and there are countries and peoples around the world who don't want that, who want a multipolar world where countries and regions can pursue their own ideologies, their own politics, their own economics, and somehow get them to work together. Okay, and I think that the first group is a very small group of countries. The second group is a very large group of countries and peoples. And I think that if I'm going to name the 21st century, I'll name it after them.
Okay,
The 21st century belongs to them.
Thank you for that. I'm afraid we are out of time, which is unfortunate. There's obviously so many things to talk about, and I want to thank Eric for coming in. We may not agree, but we can at least have a discussion. But thank you so much for coming in today and joining